Well, as we talk about making this place home, I don't know if you've ever felt like you've been left on the outside. Here's how Paul starts in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 14. He says, he tore down the walls that we used to keep each other at a distance. He tore down the walls that kept some people on the outside or on the other side. I don't know if you've ever been left out, but I know what it feels like because I've flown in airplanes. And I know what it feels like now to have been in first class just a couple of times. Here's what happened. The first time, I write about this in Barefoot Tribe, but I remember the first time I put my ID in the kiosk at Sky Harbor, and for the first time it printed out a ticket that said first class. I was like, my goodness, how did I get this? And so I thought there had to be a mistake. So I go through security, and after I'm molested by TSA, I find the first American gate agent I could find, and I showed her my ticket, and I said, you know, when I put my credit card in for an ID to print my ticket, do you think it charged me for this first class ticket? And she looked at it and she says, no, honey, you've been upgraded. I said, you're darn right, I've been upgraded. And so then I couldn't wait for them to give that call, first class board now. You know, when they call for first class to board, everybody just moves calmly and everybody takes their time. When they call for coach to board, it's like a rat maze. You know, it's like herding cats. People are scratching and screaming, but not in first. And so I go with that crowd and I get my seat. I still think there could be a mistake. And sure enough, I sit down, and this woman comes up, and in her snarky first-class voice, she says, that's how most of them talk. She says, you're in my seat. I was like, oh man, I know you don't see. I'm in 3D. She says, oh no, D's over here. There's no C in first class. Like, don't you know that? And so I said, okay, we'll switch seats. Settle down. And so I gave her seat, and then we took off. And as soon as we took off, by the way, they hand you the moist towels. And I just kept using mine as all the lower class people boarded because you just want them to see you've got that warm towel in your hands. Like you don't even need it, but you're using it. And so after they all get their seats, we take off. And then I smelled them cooking something up front. I had never smelled a smell like this on an airplane because, no, don't get me wrong, there's a smell in coach as well. It's like a junior high locker room back there. That's what that smells like. But then I smell like something Italian. And then the flight attendant comes up and she says, would you like dinner? And I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, what's for dinner? She said, baked raviolis. I said, please bring me some baked raviolis. I told her, I said, I've got a PB&J sandwich in my backpack. I really did, for this cross-country flight. And so she brings me the raviolis, and they're ravishing. And then she comes up a second time, and she said, would you like some dessert? I said, well, what are we having? And she said, it's raspberry angel cake floating on a bed of fudge. I said, hurry up with that. You know, bring that in. It was a great flight. And then it got better because as soon as we're served dessert, she pulls the curtain closed between first and everybody else. And I'll tell you what, I started to see those dirt bags from back in the lower class. They come and they look around the curtain because they want to use your baños. And you're going, no. Stay where the curtains, would you snap it? Somebody snap the curtain. And you want to tell them, hey, look, there's 8 of us sharing one bathroom up here. So you've got 197 people with 2 bathrooms. You're going to be fine. You know, what's inside of our soul that wants us to leave people on the outside? We do. And even in churches, we end up dividing and people feeling like outsiders. And the whole message of what Paul writes here in Ephesians 2 is that outsiders become insiders in Jesus' kind of church. This is the kind of church where there are no walls anymore that divide. There are no curtains with snaps. There's everyone is welcomed in. I want you to turn to Ephesians 2, and I want to read this passage again. And today we're just going to use the Message Bible. Veronica and I had the privilege 2 weeks ago of being invited to a gathering of just a few people to celebrate the life and work of Eugene Peterson. Eugene Peterson translated the Message Bible. And what I didn't know until I sat with him is that he worked from the original languages. He's a linguistic scholar, and he worked from the Hebrew and the Greek. And he was asked, so how many books have you written? He said, 36 books and the Message Bible. And they said, well, isn't that 37 books? He says, no, I didn't write the Bible. Somebody else did, named God. But I just worked on it. But he wrote it for his congregation in Montana. He felt like they weren't reading the Bible enough. And I love his home language that Eugene uses all the way through Ephesians 2. So listen to these words. He, Christ, tore down the wall we used to keep each other at a distance. Christ brought us together through his death on the cross. The cross got us to embrace, and that was the end of hostility. Christ came and preached peace to you outsiders and peace to us insiders. He treated us all as equals, and so he made us equals. Verse 19. That's plain enough, isn't it? You're no longer wandering exiles. This kingdom of faith is now your home country. You're no longer strangers or outsiders. You belong here. With as much right to the name Christian as anyone, God is building a home, and he's using us all, irrespective of how we got here and what he is building. And now he's using you, fitting you in, brick by brick. How do you like those words about home? There's something special about home and going home, isn't there? One of the first questions we ask people when we meet them is, we say, so where do you call home? Because where home is matters. The places we make home, they shape our soul. They shape who we are. We try to reflect our personalities through our homes, don't we? That's why we manicure our lawns, and that's why we decorate the inside of our homes. Some of you have really strange themes in your homes, like desert themes and wilderness themes or fishing themes. I don't know. I see these things. European techno themes. It's all their island themes. But when you walk in someone's home, you see that their life is woven into the fabric of the walls of their houses. Because when we come home, like I said, it's a reflection of who you are. Home is one of the few places in this world where you can just be yourself. You can put your feet up on the couch, you can on the dining room table. Nobody's going to tell you. It's about the last place in this world where you're still in charge. You can lay on the couch and yell at someone, get me a Coke out of the fridge, and somebody's moving. You know, they may be 5 years old or 12, but they're moving because you're still in charge at home. Home is one of the few places where we're safe in this world. When you're in trouble, you just feel like, or if you've had a bad day, if I can just make it home, it's all going to be okay. The FBI knows this. That's why they go home to people's homes. When someone escapes from prison, any criminal, they just go to their home. They wait on the front porch because you're coming home to see mom. You think if you can just make it home, it's going to be okay. And the thing is, we learn this early in life, to treasure home. We value home. And here's the thing, nobody would intentionally choose to live homeless. They say one of the worst conditions in life that we can end up with is to live without a home, to be homeless. To be homeless means we lack shelter, we lack clothes, we lack food. And nobody would say, well, I want to do that. But I mention that because I think there's a lot of Christians who choose to not have a spiritual home, to not have a home church like this church. Over my years in the pastorate, I've heard Christians say, well, I don't need the church. I don't need it. I know enough of the Bible on my own, or I can read it on my own. I think there's a lot of hypocrites in church, they'll say, or they don't care for the pastors, and so they'll stay away from having a church home. But I've watched them. Their souls shrivel. They don't do so well. They hop from place to place, but never dive in. And God never meant for us to try to do this life after him alone. And so he's given us the church. He's given us a place to call home. They say that, like I said earlier, to live without a home is absolutely exhausting. And I know it's true because I got to know a family during the Great Recession. This family had ended up at the Grove after a tough 6 months. What happened is, he said he owned a construction business, and then when the recession hit, he lost the business, but trying to keep it afloat, he spent his entire savings. He lost his house. It was foreclosed on. He said he lost somewhere around $1 million. All he had left was one minivan, and so he loaded his family into his minivan, and they started to drive around the country. 2 weeks with some friends in LA, 3 weeks with family in Seattle, and then Lincoln, Nebraska, Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas. For 6 months, they lived without a home, just trying to camp and stay with families and friends. They say if you're always traveling and never arriving, it will wear you out. It's exhausting. And that's how it is with many Christians. And so God has given this place, like the Grove, to call home. And so I have this key idea on the screen. Look at it with me. Maybe you feel spiritually homeless, like there's an ocean of distance between you and God. Or you feel like an outsider to the church. Today is your day to step inside. It's time to come home now. And so maybe you've never thought about the Grove as your home. Maybe you've only been here a week. Maybe it's your first week, or maybe you've just been here 3 months. Today, I invite you to make it home. I want to start with this first thought out of verse 19. The church, this church, is a place where outsiders become insiders. Here's what Paul says again in verse 19. That's plain enough, isn't it? You're no longer wandering exiles. This kingdom of faith is now your home country. You're not strangers or outsiders. You belong here. Have you ever started a new job and felt like an outsider? Have you ever started at a new school or started a new college and you felt like an outsider? Have you ever moved into a neighborhood or into a town or into a community and you felt like an outsider? I know that's how we all feel because it happened to my family when we first moved to the East Valley. We were living in Tempe. We had just been here for a few months when Christmas hit. And Veronica and I were sure that someone would invite us over for Christmas dinner. But Christmas Eve came and nobody invited us over. We realized that when you have 4 sons, all of those invitations dry up. All right, nobody needs you around on Christmas Day. So we go through Christmas morning. It's okay. Our kids are busy with their toys. But then Veronica says, she says, Palmer, just so you know, I'm not cooking today. She said, it's my Christmas too. She said, and I just made a big turkey at Thanksgiving. I said, well, no problem. I'll take you out. She says, well, I want to go to the Old Country Buffet. I said, the Old Country Buffet? She said, yes. She said, I'm sure they'll have like home cooking there. They'll have mashed potatoes and things like that. I said, yeah, I think they're going to have like retirement food, like tapioca and yams. You know, I don't know what's happening at Old Country Buffet. I said, okay, but if that's where you want to go, that's where we'll go. Well, at like 2 o'clock, she's saying, let's go to dinner. I go, it's the middle of the afternoon. She says, they're going to close early. It's Christmas. And she keeps bugging me. And I'm like putting her off. And finally, at like 4:30, 4:45, I said, okay, load up in the car. We drive to Old Country Buffet. We walk in the door. Just as we walk in, somebody rushes to meet us. And he said, we're closed now. I said, the door's open. It's like 2 to 5. He says, it's Christmas. Our people are going home. I said, but look at the children. I have hungry children. He didn't care. And so they closed and locked the door. And we're like, I said, okay, get in the car. We'll find something else. Newsflash, if you're wondering, no one's open restaurants on Christmas Day. You need to know this. And we drove around like 4 or 5 different restaurants. Finally, the only place we could find open is the one place that's open 24/7, even on Christmas Day, Denny's. You know the place, Denny's. We have Christmas dinner at grand slams all around. You know, Veronica will tell you it's the worst Christmas of her life. The problem is we were outsiders into a new place. C.S. Lewis says this. He says, life is filled with rings. He writes this brilliant essay titled The Inner Ring. And he says, in every society, there's a ring. In every workplace, there's an inner ring. In every school, every college, every church, there's a ring. And we have this deep longing to be on the inside, to be an insider, not an outsider. Here's what he says in this essay, The Inner Ring. He writes, I believe that in all people's lives, one of the most dominant elements is the desire to be on the inside and the terror of being left on the outside. All of us want to be accepted. And Paul says this kind of church, the Grove kind of church, is where outsiders become insiders. If you've ever been excluded, it's a really bad feeling. I hear sometimes people say, I've quit using social media, or I don't look at Facebook and Snapchat or Instagram much anymore because I don't want to see that my friends got together without me. It hurts too much. You know, if you've been excluded, that's what it feels like. And I want to say that this church, one of the reasons we started it was to have a place where outsiders could become insiders. See, I grew up in the kind of church that defined itself, and Christians defined themselves historically, I think, in our country, by defining who was an insider and who was an outsider. We talked about these big differences that we had, and so churches divided and denominations were divided by who was inside and who was outside. I think historically we've used doctrine and theology as weapons of hostility. But here's what we read in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 17. Look at it again with me. The cross got us to embrace, and that was the end of hostility. How do you like that? I have a friend named Adam Weber that leads a church in South Dakota. It's the fastest growing church in the country the name of his church is Embrace. And Paul says that the Jesus kind of church is where people embrace, that they're no longer outsiders and insiders. We don't use theology and doctrine as weapons of hostility. We find theology and doctrines that become purposes for hospitality, reasons to embrace, reasons to move toward each other and to accept and to embrace each other. Jesus kept talking about who he was for. He was for the irreligious, it seemed like. He was for the outsider. He was for the misfit. And I just want to remind you that today I'm saying all of this because the Grove is a place, and it always will be a place where outsiders can become insiders. The next thing that Paul says here is he says, you belong here. Look at verse 20 again with me, and we read, you belong here. With as much right to the name Christian as anyone, he's using all of us, irrespective of how you got here. You belong here. I love how he starts that phrase. Have you ever been in a place and as soon as you got there, you felt like, man, I don't belong here. I'm an outsider. I have no reason being here. When I first started my PhD program at Trinity in Chicago, I definitely felt like I didn't belong there. And one of the reasons is they told me I was the youngest person they'd ever accepted to the program. But then when I started to sit through classes, I started to hear other people in the class using names of people I had never heard before. Lawrence Kohlberg, Jean Piaget, Paulo Freire. I'm going, who are these people? They're using phrases, disequilibration. I don't know what it means. Pedagogy. I've never heard that word before, let alone know how to spell it. And I felt like an imposter. I felt like I didn't belong there. I felt like a fraud, like someone's going to find out Palmer's not smart enough to be in a PhD program. And so I would just sit behind the tallest person in class and hope I didn't get called out. And then after I'd been in the program about 6 months, a Dr. Linda Canal, she said, do you know that there's a phenomenon among PhD students where PhD students everywhere, when they're new to the program, they feel like they don't belong there. In fact, they feel like imposters, and someone might find out that they shouldn't be in the program, and they fear being kicked out. She said, I want you to know that we've all been there. And she said this, she said, I want you to know you belong here. You're now part of a learning community, and we're going to grow together. And maybe most of your life, or maybe even recently, you have felt like an outsider to God's church, like you don't belong here. And I want to say today, You belong in this place. If there's a group of people who Jesus was for, he was for what the Bible describes as misfits. Misfit is a very descriptive word, isn't it? It means you have missed fitting in. It means that you have missed some kind of social cue and you're embarrassing yourself if you're a misfit. But Jesus was always for the misfit. We read this in verse 21 where Paul is writing in Ephesians 2. He writes, he's fitting you in brick by brick, and he's building his house with you. This is your church home. In Ephesians 1, if you turn one page back in your Bible, verse 11, Paul writes this. He says, God chose you to be his son and his daughters. God doesn't make mistakes. He chose you, and he chose this church for you. You're not here by random happenstance. Maybe someone brought you here. You thought it's just luck, maybe bad luck that you're here this morning. But God put you here. We are the lucky ones to have you here because you belong here. One of the most powerful things in life is to be chosen, to be wanted, like the Bible says you are by God. I know this because I hear my sons talk about their friends. Years ago, when my sons were younger, now the youngest ones are in college, I would sit on the edge of their bed. And before they fell asleep, I would read to them, tell them a story, and then pray with them. And remember one fall, as school was starting, I was asking them, so who could I pray for in your class? Who needs to be prayed for? And they would give me names, and then for several nights in a row, my youngest son kept saying, well, pray for Brandon. Brandon plays alone at recess, and he eats alone at lunch. He doesn't have any friends, so we started praying for Brandon each night. And then on about night 5, he says, before we start to talk about who to pray for, he says, hey, Dad, today I chose Brandon. I said, well, what do you mean you chose Brandon? He says, well, today I got to be a captain, and we play basketball at recess. And nobody ever chooses Brandon because Brandon, to be frank, is a very bad basketball player, which is good. He says, but today when I was captain, I chose Brandon. And that changed everything. Brandon ended up being a friend. Brandon ended up in our house hanging out with us in our pool. When someone chooses you, you're no longer an outsider, you're an insider, and you belong there. And I want to say to you today, if you have been rejected by Christians in the past, or if you felt rejected by a church in the past, I'm sorry. But today that changes, because today you're in the place where God needs you, and he put you here, and you belong here. The last thing I want to say this morning is that now he's using you. It's not going to be the last thing I'm going to say, by the way. I just got ahead of myself. Now he's using you to build a home. Look at verse 20 again. And he uses such descriptive language here. God is building a home. He's using us all, irrespective of how we got here and what he's building. He used the apostles and the prophets for the foundation. Now he's using you. And he's using you to build a home. I love the home language that Paul uses, because when we built this place, and when I try to tell people about this space, I tell them what we tried to build was a giant New Testament living room. That this should feel like you've walked into someone's home, into your home. So we have couches where you can sit around and be comfortable. You're welcome to put your feet up on the coffee table. We built dining room tables so you can sit around like we're in your dining room. And the hope is you feel like you're at home here with family. And then I have here that, and Paul says, God is using you. You see, God has created you. Of all the billions of people on earth, he's given you a specific set of abilities and skills and passions that are unique to you. There are some things that you can do better than anyone else in the whole world. There are some things that you love doing and God has given you a heart for that he hasn't given to other people. And so I just want to say, we need you in this place, giving your best effort, your best work, your best passions, your best love. I really like it when I meet someone new here and hear the things, the abilities that God has given them. Last week, for example, I'm in the lobby, and I had a guy, he says, hey, my name's John. He said, I heard that Paul Gunther said, you have 13 air conditioners on campus that don't work. That was a bit on the high side. The actual number is like 5 air conditioners. So I just said, I think it's 5. 5 don't work. He says, well, I own an air conditioning business, and I'm wondering how it can help. I said, we're going to be great friends here. We're going to be like this tight. And so John came back on Wednesday. On Wednesday, he's going to show me the ones that don't work. We're going to take care of this. On that same day, on Wednesday, I met Colin. Someone had said we had an electrician come and fix a power outage we had over here. We have a lot of electrical problems here and on our 10-year-old campus. And so I was saying, hey, did anyone see the bill? Because if you don't ask for an estimate ahead, it can be a huge bill. And they said, Palmer, Colin said he's not billing us, that this is his church home and he's just serving here. I said, give me Colin's number. I'm calling right now. We're going to hang out. And so I did. I called him on the spot. And I said, Colin, we need to meet, man. Plus, we had a lot of problems. And I said, he said, I'll come over in an hour, and he did. And I said, Colin, our front entrance sign for 9 months, I'm not making this up, we haven't been able to get them to light up. There's a short somewhere. And I said, this is not an exaggeration. We've had at least 6 electricians bid it, and none of them have we let do the work, because one bid, I was told, you wouldn't believe me, I'm not exaggerating, one of the bids was $26,000. I was like, we built them for less than that, the whole structure. Anyway, Colin, in like an hour and a half, he had them working. And I love meeting people with random, awesome abilities like that. About a month ago, a little more than that, we're looking for someone to lead our Mothers of Preschoolers ministry, MOPS. And Brianna said, I don't know if we have anyone that's willing to do that this year. I don't know if we can even launch it. And I said, well, keep looking, keep praying. And she meets a woman named Lisa. And Lisa told Brianna, she says, well, I've led all kinds of MOPS ministry in the past. Lisa started leading ours. It's off to an incredible start. Lisa is a PRO pro at leading MOPS ministries. And the thing is, you have abilities that we don't know about. You have passions. Maybe you've been standing on the perimeter. Maybe you've just been attending sporadically. We need you to dive in. We need your best abilities here. Maybe you've just been watching other people. Maybe you've been suspicious, and that's okay. You're new here, but you're not new anymore. God is using you now to build this into a home. We have people here, and we need you doing things like doing urban gardening. We need you tutoring the children of immigrants. We need you teaching 4th grade boys the Bible. We need you mentoring couples whose marriages are struggling. We need you mentoring men or women or doing counseling. We need your help leading a small group and teaching the Bible. And we need you doing art and writing music. That list could go on and on. But if this is your church home, I want you to know God needs you here. All right, here's a final thing that I want to say this morning is to challenge you to make this your home. All the way back in the Old Testament, in the book of Psalms, David has been a wanderer from God and physically wandering, living in a cave for a while. His son was trying to kill him. And in Psalm 23, the famous psalm, verse 6, he says, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. He says, I've been on the run a lot of my life, but now I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I think the English language has a lot of words that talk about leaving home. We talk about sons or daughters running away from home. We say, she left home or he left home. We talk about parents splitting and we don't have a home anymore. We talk about losing our homes. But you know what the English language is short on? I think we're short on words that speak of coming home. But the Bible, as you get to know the Bible is really one long story of the human race trying to make its way back home to God. And maybe that's your story. Maybe you have felt like you don't belong here. And so maybe you haven't made this place your home, the Grove, the church, your home. Today, I want to invite you to do that. It doesn't matter where you've been. It doesn't matter what your background is. Maybe you have been an alcoholic. You can make this place your home. Maybe you've been convicted of a crime or even spent time in prison. This can be your home. Maybe you felt like you've been a misfit or you've made mistakes. You can make this place your home. You can be a survivor of abuse. You can be in the middle of your worst problem. You can have made a mess of your job or even your home, but it's time for you to make this place your home. We want to hear your story. We want you to tell your story the way only you can tell it, because God is going to use your story, the best parts and the worst parts, to change the lives of people here and the lives of people out there. And so I want to say one last time, you're not alone anymore, and it's time that you make this place your home now.